For 5 seasons, Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., brought audiences a Marine private who could not stop being kind. 8 performers built that world. The first one died in 1974, 50 years old, backstage at a dinner theater. By 2024, all but one were buried. Their graves stretch across America. Number 1 is the man whose voice everyone heard before they saw his face. Jim Nabors was 34 years old when Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., premiered on CBS in September 1964, and he had spent most of his childhood trying to breathe. Severe asthma kept him out of every sport in Sylacauga, Alabama, and pushed him toward music instead. He sang in the church choir, played clarinet in the high school band, and earned a business degree from the University of Alabama. After graduation, he typed at the United Nations, then moved to Los Angeles for the climate. By night, he sang at a Santa Monica tavern called The Horn, between shifts as a film cutter for NBC. Andy Griffith walked into The Horn one evening in 1962, watched Nabors do a country bumpkin character between songs, and hired him for a single guest spot on The Andy Griffith Show. One shot became 23 episodes. A recurring character became a spin-off. 5 seasons of Gomer Pyle, U.S.M.C., never fell out of the Nielsen Top 10. Nabors had quietly negotiated part ownership, which would pay him in syndication for the rest of his life. When the show ended, he hosted his own CBS Variety Hour, opened 12 straight seasons of The Carol Burnett Show, and from 1972 onward sang Back Home Again in Indiana before nearly every Indianapolis 500. After a 1994 liver transplant, he retired to a Hawaiian macadamia plantation. On January 15, 2013, at age 82, he married his partner of 38 years, a retired Honolulu firefighter named Stan Cadwallader, in a Seattle hotel. 4 years later, on November 30, 2017, Jim Nabors died at home in Honolulu at 87, with Stan at his side. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean off the Honolulu coast. Gomer Pyle was the Marine who could not stop being kind. Jim Nabors was the man who quietly turned that kindness into a fortune and asked, at the end, only to be returned to the sea. At number 2 stood the man whose voice everyone in 1960s America could imitate and whose end nobody saw coming. Frank Sutton was 40 years old at the premiere, a Tennessee newspaperman's son who had spent most of his late teens going to 14 Pacific assault landings. Born in Clarksville on October 23, 1923, he was the only child of a journalist who would die of a stomach hemorrhage when Frank was 14. East Nashville High School graduated him in 1941. The Marines refused him a year later for colorblindness, so the Army took him instead. From 1943 to 1946, with the 6th Infantry Division's 293rd Joint Assault Signal Company, he came ashore at Leyte, Luzon, Bataan, and Corregidor, and was finally honorably discharged as a sergeant. With the GY Bill, he attended the Columbia University School of General Studies and graduated cum laude in drama in 1952. The breakthrough came 12 years later. As Gunnery Sergeant Vince Carter, Sutton became television's most reliably furious man. Bulging eyes, flaring nostrils, a slow-burn temper that always crossed the same fuse line at the same moment in every act. Underneath the rage was something he never quite let go. Real love for the Marine he could not stop yelling at. When the production filmed Sergeant Carter in dress uniform, they let Sutton wear some of his actual World War II Army decorations on the Marine coat. The man the Marines had rejected wore his own medals as the most famous Marine on television. He married Toby Eigler in Pennsylvania in 1949, and they had 2 children, Joseph and Amanda. His only major film role had been Ralph in the 1955 Best Picture winner, Marty. After Gomer Pyle ended in 1969, Sutton appeared on Jim Nabors' variety show alongside Ronnie Schell, and then the work thinned to dinner theater tours, The Odd Couple, Anything Goes, and a Murray Shisgle comedy called Love. On June 28, 1974, Sutton was at the Beverly Barn Dinner Playhouse in Shreveport, Louisiana, preparing for that night's performance of Love. A massive heart attack took him backstage. He never made it on stage. Frank Sutton was 50 years old. His body was sent home to Clarksville, Tennessee, and buried in Greenwood Cemetery, where his headstone reads, in the order he would have chosen: actor, husband, father, veteran. Visitors leave coins on top. Sergeant Carter was a Marine who could break a man with one syllable. Frank Sutton was a soldier the Marines did not want, who served his country anyway, and died waiting for a curtain to go up. If you were watching television the year the news came that Frank Sutton was gone at 50, drop a comment and tell us what you remember about that day. We read everyone. Coming in at number 3 is a man you have seen more often than almost any actor of his generation, and never once known by name. Alan Melvin was 42 when he walked onto the Gomer Pyle set in 1965 to play Staff Sergeant Charlie Hacker, the bunkmate rival from a neighboring platoon whose only purpose was to one-up Vince Carter. The two men screamed at each other for 4 seasons, and the scenes where Carter and Hacker shared a frame are some of the loudest the show ever filmed. Born in Kansas City on February 18, 1923, Melvin was raised in New York by his paternal grandparents. He attended Columbia University, served in the Navy during World War II, and in March 1944 married Amalia Faustina Sestero. The marriage lasted 64 years. Amalia outlived him by 12 more and died in 2020 at 100. His career began in the sound effects department of NBC Radio. A nightclub act of movie star impressions written by his friend Richard Condon, the same man who would later write The Manchurian Candidate, won him Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. From Stalag 17 on Broadway, he was pulled onto the Phil Silvers Show as Corporal Henshaw, and a career was made. What followed is a kind of quiet record. Melvin became Sam the Butcher on The Brady Bunch. He became Barney Hefner on All in the Family and the full run of Archie Bunker's Place. He voiced Magilla Gorilla, Bluto on Popeye, and Drooper on The Banana Splits. For 15 straight years, he played Al the Plumber in Liquid Plumber commercials. On January 17, 2008, after a long fight with cancer, Alan Melvin died at home in Brentwood, California, at 84. He was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, a few feet from Carol O'Connor, whose funeral Melvin had been too afraid of flying to attend, and directly beside the 1950s pinup Betty Page, whose birth and death years happened to match his exactly. Sergeant Hacker was the rival who screamed across the parade ground at Sergeant Carter. Alan Melvin was the kindest second banana on television, the husband of one woman for 64 years, and the voice your kids heard every Saturday morning without ever learning the name. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these full cast retrospectives on the shows you grew up with, told the way these people deserve to be told. The 4th name on the call sheet is the one whose next role would haunt American television for a decade. William Christopher was 32 when he first appeared as Private Lester Hummel in 1965, one of the bunkmates orbiting Gomer. Born in Evanston, Illinois on October 20, 1932, into a family that believed itself descended from Paul Revere, Christopher attended New Trier High School in Winnetka, the same school that produced Charlton Heston, Rock Hudson, Ralph Bellamy, and Anne Margaret. He went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut, where he majored in drama, focused his studies on Greek literature, and taught himself Latin and Greek on the side. A blind date in the mid-1950s introduced him to a woman named Barbara. They married in 1957 and stayed married for 59 years. In 1972, after the original actor was replaced, Christopher was cast as Father Francis John Patrick Mulcahy on the new CBS comedy MASH. He played the character for the entire 11-year run, then continued on after MASH for 2 more seasons. The 1983 finale he appeared in was watched by nearly 106 million people. As Mulcahy, he became the moral conscience of one of the most watched sitcoms in American history. A soft-spoken army chaplain who said grace over the worst surgery of the Korean War, and somehow held the room steady. He and Barbara adopted 2 sons, John and Ned. Ned was diagnosed with autism. In an era when most parents did not talk publicly about their autistic children, the Christophers did. William became a national spokesperson for the National Autistic Society and recorded years of public service announcements. In 1989, he and Barbara wrote a book together called Mixed Blessings About Raising Ned. He kept doing that work long after MASH was off the air. On December 31, 2016, at 7:12 in the morning, William Christopher died at his home in Pasadena, California, at the age of 84. The cause was small cell lung cancer, which he had been fighting for 18 months. Barbara and son John were with him. It was New Year's Eve, exactly 1 year to the day after his MASH castmate Wayne Rogers had died. His burial location was kept private at the family's request, the way Mulcahy himself might have preferred. Lester Hummel was the quiet recruit who stood at attention, while Sergeant Carter screamed. William Christopher was the man who played the gentlest priest in television history and spent 30 years making sure other parents of autistic children would never have to feel alone. At number 5 was the corporal who tried, week after week, to keep Sergeant Carter from doing anything truly catastrophic to Gomer. Roy Stewart was 38 when he was cast as Corporal Chuck Boyle in 1965, and he stayed for 58 episodes across 3 seasons, the longest run of any cast member after the 2 leads. Born in the Bronx on July 17, 1927, Stewart began his career in New York nightclubs and theater. He danced in a touring production of Con Con opposite Cheetah Rivera, made Broadway in the musicals Beg, Borrow or Steal, and Café Crown, and built a parallel career across more than 100 television commercials in the 1970s, including a memorable Kendall oil spot. After Gomer Pyle, he guest-starred on Mr. Ed, Bewitched, Sanford and Son, The Carol Burnett Show, Santa Barbara, The Golden Girls, Mama's Family, and General Hospital. For decades, he was a member of Theater West. He never married. His longtime companion of nearly 40 years was a man named Claude Hubert, and the two of them were together until the end. The end came on Christmas Day. On December 25, 2005, in a hospital bed at the Motion Picture and Television Country House in Woodland Hills. With Claude at his side and a holiday going on outside the window, Roy Stewart died of complications from cancer at 78. The funeral was private. His body was buried at Eden Memorial Park Cemetery in Mission Hills, California, in the section called the Gardens of Jacob. Corporal Boyle was the dependable second-in-command who held the platoon together. Roy Stewart was a Broadway dancer turned television character actor who loved one person for 38 years and went home for Christmas. Sixth on the roster, rarely smiled on the show, and never wasted a syllable. Forrest Compton played Lieutenant Colonel Edward Gray, the steady, no-nonsense base commander whose corner office overlooked the parade ground and whose patience with Sergeant Carter ran thinner every season. He appeared in 41 episodes, almost always at his desk, almost always disappointed. Compton was born in Reading, Pennsylvania on September 15, 1925. His father sold aluminum pots and pans and worked the local steel mill. Right out of high school, the Army drafted him into the 103rd Infantry Division, and he spent the closing years of World War II crossing France. When the war ended, he came home, used the GI Bill at Swarthmore College, switched from pre-law to English, and then earned a Master of Fine Arts at the Yale School of Drama. One of his classmates and friends was a young actor named Paul Newman. His first paid screen work was a series of television commercials for cheese crackers. In 1971, 2 years after Gomer Pyle ended, Compton found the role that would define the rest of his career. He was cast as District Attorney Mike Carr on the long-running daytime soap The Edge of Night, where he appeared in well over 2,000 episodes until the show was canceled in 1984. 13 years he played that part. He married Jean Sementini on September 28, 1975, in the middle of that run, and they lived together for decades on Shelter Island, New York. His final on-screen role was on the NBC comedy Ed in 2002. He had been retired for 18 years when, on April 4, 2020, in the first dark weeks of the American pandemic, Forrest Compton died of complications from COVID-19 at his home on Shelter Island. He was 94 years old, he was cremated, and his ashes were taken back to Pennsylvania and interred with his parents at St. Michael's Cemetery in Birdsboro, Berks County. About 40 minutes from the Reading hometown, he had left more than 70 years earlier to fight in France. Colonel Gray was the officer behind the desk who saw right through every man in the room. Forrest Compton was a teenage infantryman who had crossed France, gone to Yale with Paul Newman, played the same district attorney for 13 years on daytime television, and was killed at 94 by a virus nobody had heard of 3 months earlier. The seventh name belongs to Gomer Pyle's girlfriend. Elizabeth MacRae played Lou Ann Poovey, the Southern belle from North Carolina who came to Los Angeles to become a singer and turned out to be a terrible one. MacRae was 30 when she first appeared in the 1966 episode Love's Old Sweet Song, signed for one episode only. The chemistry was so immediate that Lou Ann became Gomer's permanent on-screen sweetheart for the final 3 seasons. Born in Columbia, South Carolina, on February 22, 1936, and raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina, she was the daughter of a North Carolina attorney who would later sit as a Cumberland County Superior Court judge. After Holton Arms Prep School in Washington, she auditioned at 21 for Otto Preminger for the lead in St. Joan. She did not get the part. Preminger told her she had intuitive talent and to keep going. She studied under Uta Hagen at the Herbert Berghoff Studio in New York. Her father gave her $100 and told her to come home when it was gone. Her first marriage was to blacklisted Hollywood screenwriter Nedrick Young, until his death in 1968. Shortly afterward, she married Charles Day Halsey, Jr. They were married for 55 years. In 1974, she played Meredith opposite Gene Hackman in Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation. In her later years, having returned home to Fayetteville, MacRae worked as a drug and alcohol counselor at the Freedom Institute in New York, and she called that work the most important thing she ever did. Charles Halsey died on March 29, 2024. Elizabeth MacRae died 2 months later, on May 27, 2024, peacefully at home in Fayetteville at 88. She was buried at Cross Creek Cemetery No. 2 in Fayetteville, in family ground that already held her mother, her brother, and her sister. Lou Ann Poovey was the ditzy Southern belle who could not carry a tune. Elizabeth MacRae was a judge's daughter and an Uta Hagen student who walked away from Hollywood to counsel people through addiction, and went home to die in the family cemetery. Last on the call sheet is the only one of them still here. Ronnie Schell was 32 when Gomer Pyle premiered in 1964, and he played Private Duke Slater, the city's smart wisecracker beside Gomer in the barracks, the platoon's resident smart aleck with a stand-up comedian's timing. The timing was real. Schell was a working comic. Born in Richmond, California on December 23, 1931, he was a notorious class clown who was expelled from school more than once. Semi-pro baseball came first, until he enlisted in the United States Air Force, where he served 4 years and reached Airman First Class while emceeing service variety shows. After discharge, he went on to San Francisco State University, formed a comedy duo, then went solo at the Hungry Eye and the Purple Onion in San Francisco. In 1958, he opened a tour for the Kingston Trio. He once appeared as a contestant on You Bet Your Life and told Groucho Marx he wanted a career in show business. For the rest of his life, he called himself America's slowest rising comedian. He left Gomer Pyle after 3 seasons to star in his own CBS sitcom, Good Morning World, opposite a then-unknown Goldie Hawn as the gossipy neighbor. The show was canceled after 1 year, and Schell returned to Gomer Pyle for its final season. After 1969, he kept working. He was the voice of Jason on Battle of the Planets. Guest spots followed on what feels like every American sitcom of the next 4 decades. The Golden Girls, Happy Days, The Carol Burnett Show, Charlie's Angels, The Dukes of Hazzard, The Love Boat, Saved by the Bell, Sanford and Son. He starred in 5 Disney films. For a stretch as an octogenarian, he was the oldest working comedian on the Las Vegas Strip. Janet Rodberg married him on December 6, 1968. They are still married. They have 2 sons, Gregory and Chris. They live in the Los Angeles area, where Schell served for years as the honorary mayor of Encino. On December 23, 2025, Ronnie Schell turned 94. He posted on his Facebook page that day, From Gomer Pyle to 94. Now that is a long-running series, still nailing the role of me. He continues to live in Encino, California, the only surviving cast member of one of the most successful spin-offs in television history. Duke Slater was the wisecracker who never met a punchline he could not land. Ronnie Schell is 94 years old, still living in Encino, still telling jokes on his Facebook page, still answering his own door. From a Hawaiian shoreline to a Tennessee headstone to a North Carolina family plot to a Pennsylvania country churchyard, they ended up everywhere. One of them is still in Encino,